All right. Welcome, Garrett, to the Self-Employment Success Podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, Leland. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's get started. Why don't you tell the listeners kind of who you are personally and a little bit about your business?
Sure. Happy to. So my name is Garrett Delph. I live here in San Diego, California. Have a beautiful family. We have 4 great kids. Youngest is 14, oldest is 25. Very proud of her, by the way. She just graduated from Columbia, got her master's in genetic counseling. So that's we're proud parents about that one. She's back in LA now, so all good. And what else? I'm a fellow entrepreneur, and I have founded and run a company called Clarity Ops, where we focus on serving high growth companies that are struggling to scale. Usually there's at some point either a revenue threshold or operational threshold that's keeping them from breaking through to the other side, kind of that law of the lid thing. And typically it's rooted in some sort of operational infrastructure challenge that integrate with people, process, or performance. And so we have built a thing called FAST frameworks. That FAST is an acronym for, frameworks, assessments, systems, and templates, ultimately, that we have homegrown over the years to make it really easy to plug and play operational infrastructure in a business so people can get back on the rails, get back on track. And I'd say our big differentiator for what it's worth is where a lot of strategic consultants bring strategy to the table, and often very great strategy. It's often required of the business that received that strategy to go build it, kind of figure out the how part. Strategy is the what, process is the how, and infrastructure is the how. But it's a catch-22 because businesses often struggle to build scalable processes, and that's often why they don't do it. So that's where we step in, especially is we can do the how part and build the how part so that a business can depend on those systems in perpetuity and dependably into the future.
There's so many things that you're talking about that I want to riff off of, because it does feel like any business, especially if you're not like acquiring an established business, if you're building a business from the bottom up, you most likely start in like the rent and ramen phase. Like, I'm just trying to like make this work and be able to pay for my life. But then once you pass that, you're now into the building and scaling phase. And I do feel like, I like that you said it's a revenue problem or an operations problem, because eventually you hit this bottleneck. And whether it's, the owner has not put the people and systems in place, so everything's bottlenecking at them, or, the revenue, like the cost to implement these changes doesn't equate with the revenue. Like, you hit this bottleneck, and in order to kind of push past that is this real big pain point. It's almost like you're taking your business to the next level, and therefore you need new systems, maybe new people, new processes. And it takes kind of restructuring the system, because, hey, this baby business has now grown into an adult business, and therefore we need to kind of go through all the changes to get there. Most of the time, entrepreneurs are really great at working in their business and not working on their business. So they're great at the day-to-day stuff, but when it comes to, the business itself has an issue, and we need to kind of separate ourselves from the business to look at it, analyze it, decide the change, and then implement it. That takes totally different muscles, totally different skills, and can be really uncomfortable. So can you speak to that at all, or like what's been your experience?
Yeah, for sure. By the way, we know this is very common to not work in the business for a whole host of different reasons. Sometimes they're political, sometimes you're just too close to it, sometimes you don't understand it, all these different things. But it does remind me of the cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Yeah,
It,
totally.
it's very akin to that. And I was thinking too, in terms of understanding why. Um, so, what's that old adage? What got you here won't get you there.
Hmm.
Even for mature companies who actually, I would contend, did the right thing as they pursued growth through their sales channels and driving revenue, they built infrastructure to support that weight, right? Um, but
Mm.
if you're constantly growing, that has to iterate.
Mm.
That you gotta, your infrastructure has to keep up with the new weight and the new pressure that comes from adding people and adding customers and adding new technology, these sorts of things, right? And
Hmm.
so this becomes a problem not only for startups, but to your point, businesses that are growing in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, uh, Leland, would you? I lost track. I riffed there for a second. Would you ask the primary question again so I can
No,
answer
you
that?
addressed it. It was basically just, we know that this bottleneck is an issue. And a lot of times it comes from, working too much in your business and not on your business, the pain points. Like you said, even companies who have done everything right along the way
Right.
still need to iterate, still need to, come in and make change. You're kind of always growing. It
Yes.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I said yes, 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 yes,
Oh.
and then I had a thought that I'll share after you're done. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, just the thought that I had was like business on this point strikes me like, you know, the human heart or like plants. It's like if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And so trees, they just grow until they die. They just keep growing. It's not like they hit maturity and then just stay there. It's like they're
Right.
going to keep growing and changing and growing new branches and growing, like going through the seasons until they die.
That's
Same
right.
thing, like as a human, as a leader, as a person, if you're not growing, if you're not actively reiterating, actively, working on yourself, you will begin to coast and therefore your heart is beginning to die. And I feel the same way about business. It's like if your business is not constantly reiterating, constantly growing, constantly
Yep.
changing, whether it's like your brand is maturing, your team is growing, your infrastructure, your technology, your systems, it's like that's when you begin to fall behind. That's when your business begins to become unhealthy. And so I like that you said, even when everything's been going right,
Yeah.
you still, if you're growing, need to be changing because of there's going to be added pressure, there's going to be added refinement that's going to be required.
That's right. Added weight. And if any, so let's talk about businesses that have had a good run. They've had, maybe they're 3 to 10 million in revenue, let's say. But there was a season where they let go of the infrastructure. They let go of their processes and systems, but they grew in people and they grew in customer base. What ends up happening is the business leaders become disoriented. I call it management vertigo.
Mm.
And they become, they lose transparency about who's doing what and what those people did to get there.
Mm.
And so not only are they disoriented, but they're too close to it, And typically in businesses, what I've seen anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts. What I've seen is businesses don't have bespoke functions, specifically people or teams that are designed to fully focus on infrastructure so that the internals can keep up with the customer and revenue growth and the internal employment growth.
Mm-hmm.
Usually that's not there. And so what businesses do is they say to their function heads or to their business leaders, figure it out. But we're not going to give
Mm-hmm.
you a way to figure it out, how to do it. You just got to figure it out. And so you got all of these people not being SMEs in how to build infrastructure. They're all doing it in silo and trying to solve their own problems using different recipes, different ways. Some have some success, some not. So there's all of this disjointed approach to solving infrastructure. There's no unity.
Mm.
And that's another way businesses get in trouble, because they
Mm-hmm.
approach building framework with disoriented, different, and disconnected frameworks that are half-baked, half-not, had no semblance.
Mm.
That's another way business get in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have yet to come across a business that has like an internal operations person.
Right.
They have operations teams, but typically
That's right.
those people are carrying out the day-to-day operations. They might
That's
have
right.
like an HR or like a human resources team, but that's mostly just hiring, payroll, kind of again,
Hmm.
some internal operations, but it's not, hey, here's where the company's bottlenecking, here's how we're operating in silos, but how these streams should work, you know,
Right.
in order to scale, in order to create, people, processes, and systems that will allow us to handle more volume, provide more value, whatever it may be that
Yep.
is the goal of the company. But
Yep.
you're right.
You know
I've
what?
yet to see that. I feel like that's when people hire business consultants
The,
to come in and
that's right.
diagnose and solve those issues. But another thing that you said that I really appreciated was many people hire consultants, get great strategies, and never implement them. And I find that to be extremely true in what I do, the financial planning side, is there are so many people who get great financial plans given to them, but never know how to implement them. And in my experience, like great advice, whether it's financial, whether it's business, whether it's
Yeah.
therapy, like great advice that goes unimplemented does not deliver any value, is not like it doesn't get you across the finish line. It's just wasted
Yeah.
dollars at that point.
Yeah.
So I like that you
And it's
said you actually
I,
carry that out.
I'd love to comment on that because I think
Hmm.
this is not talked about enough. You know, um, businesses who hire consultants, let's talk the big four. They're in tremendous amount of pain, in high need to get help. And so, typically you go either to a referral or you go to a trusted source. So I was just on a call with a senior director from Pfizer, talking
Mm.
about some of their challenges. And he was frustratingly underwhelmed. They chose one of the big four to consult them recently. And extremely underwhelmed with results because it came down to this very point. They were
Mm.
given strategy, and at the end of the day, his teams didn't implement. Why?
Mm.
Because in California, side note, in California on our freeways, we have a organization called Caltrans. Their only function is to make sure that our freeways are safe and that they scale. That's their
Mm.
only function. So, especially on some of the major artery freeways, all they're doing all year long is expanding, expanding, expanding. Because otherwise, to your point of a bottleneck, we would be in a bottleneck in perpetuity. Like you can imagine over time, it would be useless to get on the freeway because there was no expansion effort.
Mm.
And so similar with Pfizer and similar with what we were just talking about, you get all this excitement to get help from consultants that come in. But then at the end of the day, the implementation of that strategy requires builders.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically SMEs who specialize in architecting infrastructure for scale that is cross-functional, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
And can you define SME just for the listeners?
I'm sorry, yeah, subject matter expert.
Okay,
Sort of like
great.
if you lived on a waterway and you needed to build a bridge, you want to find an
Mm-hmm.
architect that specializes in building bridges so that thing doesn't collapse and it sustains,
Yep. Awesome. So how did you get here? Because I mean, have you been in business consulting your entire career? Is that what you went to school for? Like what led you down the journey of this? And many people do end up working with the big four, like major consulting companies.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to then go out on your own and start Clarity Ops? Like tell us your story.
Sure. Well, it wasn't it was never planned for. Um, I I built a few businesses along the way, and it turned out the nature of those businesses were had heavy requirements on people
Mm.
and heavy requirements on IT. And the deliverable was always a product that people needed to use process for to deliver. And so it required all of the classic functions in heavy capacity: CS, sales, marketing, finance, IT, all of these, production, all these things. And I just went through turmoil, being a guy that came out of corporate America and just was in that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I wanted to do my own thing. And so that's what led me to building, starting a career as an entrepreneur, but I didn't know anything about business. And so
Mm.
like, I'm reminded of like I remember we were having, with, a company that I still own, but it's being operated by our leaders called Shoot.edit. And we were having some decent growth. We were, just over 2 million a year in annual revenue, and that was great. And our head of marketing decided he was going to run a sales campaign, and he had a goal of driving 400K over the course of 5 calendar days, which meant we needed to acquire 125 customers.
Mm.
And great offer, great plan, definitely an achievable goal because our pipeline was hot. And so we put this all together, and he ran it. This is early on, still learning. Here was the problem: he was super successful, but he didn't
Mm.
tell anybody. And
Mm.
so our lead base is in the 80,000 realm. And so suddenly the campaign goes live. Our customer support team is barraged with questions about this offer, and they knew nothing about it. The
Mm.
sales team has all of their hot leads. They're getting phone calls and emails and SMSs going, "Hey, we just want to learn more before we sign up." And nobody knew anything. Fascinating, right?
Oh,
Then
no.
customer acquisition hits, and we're getting now nearing 100 new signups. People are placing orders, and production is freaking out because they didn't capacity plan for
Mm-hmm.
all of the demand that was going to come down the supply chain tunnel to fulfill, which puts this huge backlog on turnaround time and floods
Mm-hmm.
the cogs, right? So this was I'm making it sound like a big deal, and it was, but it was my first introduction to silos, for example, and
Mm.
how when you operate in silo as business leaders and you make decisions in a vacuum without communicating, how much how much of a negative ripple effect that permeates throughout the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could go on and on in terms of efficiencies in cogs, or inefficiencies in cogs rather, where
Mm-hmm.
they're bloated, and the senior leaders are the last ones to find out. You're paying 5x when you should be paying 1x.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, what I realized, we have got to solve these problems because I'm hyper allergic to chaos. Um, and I think most people are, like, it is not fun to live in a work environment where there's high stress. High stress produces low happiness
Mm-hmm.
and lots of bad stuff. And so just over time, I worked with our leaders to build our own solutions to solve these problems at scale. And they have culminated, and I think we have, 18 different frameworks. Within that, we have 5 different bespoke systems, and these all were serving my businesses really well that have scaled internationally. And it occurred to me a few years ago, like, oh my gosh, like, there is not a plug and play system and framework out there that people can use in business immediately and not have to go through the blood, sweat, and tears of building themselves. And we talked about this.
Mm.
Most people don't do it because they don't want to put the money towards it, and it's really heavy lifting and complex. Just so
Mm-hmm.
happens I had to. I didn't feel like I had a choice, and then I ended up with these
Mm.
tools, and so I'm like, well, I love it. I'm weird like that. I love solving these really difficult problems, and ended up with the tools to do it. And
Mm.
so that's why Clarity Ops was birthed. It's because I want to make a dent in that stat of 9 in 10 businesses fail, and help
Mm.
people get through these problems quickly, and then give them dependable rails for moving forward.
Mm. I want to go into that kind of like pre-built plug and play system here in a second, but something you said that I really liked was high stress equals low happiness. And I
Yeah.
think one of the pieces, like so often we think of, or we listen to this, type of podcast, or we hear things like this, and we're thinking about it from the business owner view, which is true. Like, don't build a business that just sucks. Like, don't build a business that's so stressful that you're like, what am I doing? This is terrible.
Yeah.
But also, like, in businesses that haven't created these systems and operations for the people working in them, it creates just immense burnout. I think we're seeing this revolution happening, or this movement towards like employers needing to create systems for their people to prevent burnout, to prevent turnover. But when you don't have it, and communication is bad, and there's just a bunch of middle managers who are just hearing from the person above them, and it is so siloed, that's totally where I worked prior to starting my firm, was a big corporate entity. And I just reported to my business manager, who was being yelled at by their business manager. And then someone over here is setting my goals for the year, but it doesn't align with this revenue projection. And so it was like, I'm hitting all my goals, and yet somehow no one seems to be, everyone's still stressed. Like, no matter how much I exceed what you tell me to do, everyone's stressed because no one's communicating, and the systems are terrible. And I just find that like that creates high turnover. That firm has lost so many employees that then they keep just bringing on fresh advisors and losing them, but then it doesn't actually move the business forward. And I think that's true of my experience, but also I just think when we don't have that, it creates a high stress environment for everyone, not just the leadership. It
does.
Down to the rank and file, everyone is stressed because it's just messy. And then for the rank and file who have less buy-in to your business, why should they stay when they can go over here to a company that has great systems, a great defined role, they know exactly what's going to happen.
That's right.
So I just think like there's so many, you have to realize like not only will this help you scale your business, it'll also help prevent turnover among your employees, and a healthy team can also work, in synergy and compound on itself, like the value. You're saving costs just there because you're not always headhunting and trying to figure out, how do I pay for new people? It's much more affordable to keep employees than, lose employees.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, like, so you've created this system through Clarity Ops that is plug and play. How does that work when, part of the reason why it is such a high, lift to try and implement new systems is because businesses are in different industries with different needs, different systems. Like, how does the plug and play work when my business might be different than another person's business? So I guess speak to what this offering is and how it works.
Yeah, happy to. Well, my hypothesis is, irrespective of a business domain, that there are sort of three pillar categories that are agnostic to any business, and these three areas apply to all of them. And that is what we call P3: people, process, and performance. Every great company is built by great people. And every great company that succeeds have great processes. And those processes are what fuel great performance. Like, this is the case across the board with anybody who's succeeding. There are some edge cases and anomalies, but I promise you, if you go talk to their people, they're very, very unhappy. They're very unhappy. And so, depending on where a business is in their journey, and the pain that they're experiencing will depend on where we partner with and begin to go in and create transformation that will result in the goals achieved. But it always starts with a health assessment. We call it a health and fitness assessment. And I like that because, I think business, I think you said it, the business is like a body. Oh yeah, you mentioned organs, and there's all of these interdependent moving parts. They all need each other, and they need to be in rhythm. And so we'll go in and assess, all right, just like you would with a doctor, what's going on. We don't let symptoms confuse us, and we don't allow symptoms to be interpreted as the problem. We view them only as symptoms, and then dig deeper, figure out where the root is. But at the end of the day, it starts with people, and you create, starting with vision, mission. A lot of entrepreneurs, even having some decent success, have a very clear vision in their brain, but they've never written it down and told it to their people. And then from there, you distill vision and mission in a published fashion into published core values. And again, a lot of great companies that are operating in chaos and forging ahead, but at the cost of people and the cost of, inflated cost of goods sold and bloated expenses. And that's because they don't have a framework around how they make decisions. And so our next step is getting into frameworking and defining what you value. So for example, if as a company, if you've not defined that you value accountability, or if you haven't said we value actually measuring our output, then you won't do it. And if you do, it'll be by accident, not on purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That is my experience.
Great. And so there's so once we get some of the foundational elements in place, another framework we created is called the Quad Core Management Framework. And this is all about load balancing your leadership in a healthy way that creates strength. I created that framework because I was chief sinner in this department, not maliciously, accidentally. I just assumed if I hired smart people, I could do what many of the books say and what everybody on LinkedIn says: hire smart people and set them free. And I tried that many times, and it was a total train wreck. And it cost me a bunch of money, lost customers, and a lot of quits from frustrated employees. And what I realized is even great people need direction and structure and need a semblance of governance. And more importantly, they need to be load balanced. What often chief executive officers and C-suite do is they go, "You're really smart, you can do it all." It's the biggest lie in business. And so leaders need permission to be load balanced, to say, all right, if my job is to manage people, then my job is not to go build stuff. If my job is to manage and support people, then my job is not to drive strategy. If my job is to manage and support people, then my job is not to be a project manager. But what businesses mostly do is they club all four of these, which Jeff Bezos sternly warns against. Instead, they need to be empowered to focus on their job, right? And not be splintered into all of these different directions, because then their RAM gets cluttered, right? And they get stopped up. So that's one example of a framework. Another example of a framework we use at the foundational level is a thing we've coined called MAPS, purposely. And that's an acronym for maintaining alliance with your priorities and strategies. And embedded, and it's taken from Google Maps, because maps give us perfect instructions and efficient routes to get from A to Z, right? And embedded in that is a system where you can easily articulate what people do, where they should focus, and exactly how they are to do the things they're supposed to do to get their job done. And that permeates into what we call key focus areas, and then business function maps. And it's a real easy mapped way to see what everybody is doing, so you can align the goals to the activities. So now you have management that's load balanced, and they're hyper focused in their lane. And then depending on their function, they're clear about what each of their people are doing on their teams, not only focusing on the macro, but doing it the micro. And all of that is iteratable and flexible and easy to update and transferable, which then leads us into another framework we have called Relay, a knowledge transfer system. Because if you don't document what you do when your super smart people leave, you'll have to start over. And if you have to start over, you're in big trouble.
I'm learning that the hard way, literally as we speak. So
You are.
It's timely to hear that. Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah, we need our systems documented so that when we hire new people, it's like, here it is. Here's the system.
Yeah.
Not like man. Every single thing we're doing, like, okay, here's how we do that.
Yes. Yes.
It is.
And so on that note, we don't leave that next step to chance. And so inside of Relay is a system called workflow journey maps and SOP journey maps that, again, just facilitate an easy to follow template to make sure that you don't have to go, invent your own way of documenting process, procedure, policy, but you can riff off of an already proven template that works at scale. And that's the idea. And I'll just maybe summarize with this and then turn it back over to you, Leland, is when it comes to operational efficiency, even if businesses had all of the right ideas to go build, they typically, like we talked about, don't have people in place to go do it, and they don't have the budget to go do it. So my goal at Clarity Ops is to empower you to move fast, be accurate, and create transformation 10x faster than you ever could on your own or with another strategic partner that only gives you strategy.
I mean, it's impressive that you've built this out. And clearly it's come from like your own experience from, built like being in a corporate setting to building your own businesses to just seeing like there is a need here. And as someone who is, like you said, allergic to chaos, which I think you mentioned we all are. I love like processes. I need to be better at them. But like have been, when there's an established workflow, oh man, it's like scratching a good itch. And that's just the base of what you're saying is like, we've got all these levels that can plug and play. And I love that you've created it you're right, as you're saying, and I'm like, every business would benefit from that, no matter if you're, selling widgets or doing taxes or serving someone. Like, you found kind of the key pieces that are needed, which is just really impressive, honestly. So for you, kind of having built some businesses yourself, now kind of most recently on Clarity Ops, like as an entrepreneur yourself, what has surprised you the most about self-employment, that journey that you've been on?
That's a fantastic question. And my answer is humbling to just to think about it. But I think the biggest challenge insight is I often forget the amount of work and grit it takes to not only get there, but keep going. That still gets me. It's just like, as soon as you have this, level, you level up and you hit, some sort of level of success, whether it's, something you built, or it's a revenue threshold, or it's an accolade, or, something in your KPIs was matured. You're like, you get to breathe, and then suddenly you're hit with another problem. Or you're aspirational and you want to get to another peak that's higher than the last one, which means you got to go through it again. And I forget that a lot, I remember it more these days, but I still have these moments of forgetfulness. I'm like, okay, remember, this is normal. This is normal.
Totally. It's like you keep thinking like, once I break through this, then we're good. But it's like, again, we're always growing. We're always moving. Like, there's going to be new pieces to keep working on.
I wonder too, like for an entrepreneur that is okay with maybe sustaining but not growing, that I don't think that's not a problem, because you just maintain and you stay. you know.
Yeah.
Which, careful though, because like, if you're not growing, you're dying. I do believe that. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
tricky thing. But my comment, I think, is more for people that want to keep growing,
Mm-hmm.
and want to keep rising up.
Totally. What was the low point for you?
Several. I think maybe the most hurtful, probably low point, which was both like my heart and my mind, but also I felt like I failed.
Mm.
The chairman of my board back in 2012 sat me down one day and said, if you don't stop micromanaging your leaders, you're going to kill your company, and you're going to kill any company you try and start in the future.
Mm. Wow.
And he was, he did it in a way. It was really stern. It was like he was frustrated, and rightfully so. And so that really got a hook in me. It hurt my feelings, but not that I was offended by what he said. It hurt my feelings that I was doing that. I was being that guy. I was being that owner. I was being that CEO. But on the flip side, Leland, it was probably one of the best things I could have ever heard, because I didn't, and we were having pretty good success, but I didn't understand how to operate any other way because there was no framework to do the things I wanted to do, so it forced me to figure out how to build infrastructure that by design governs the people, where I don't have to constantly be on top of people because they're all over the place. And so at the end of the day, I was the victim of not having infrastructure, organizational governance, administrative governance. And so what was my response? Constantly be tailgating everybody to tell them to get back in their lane and pick up the stuff that was dropped, because there was no other way. And I want to make a quick comment, because I think this is important. For businesses in venture, or for businesses that have they have financial elasticity for whatever reason, IPO, they're got venture and they've given them like a 5-year runway to burn through cash. Maybe their business model, they just have crazy amounts of margin. Probably doesn't apply. They can weather, not having infrastructure, being micromanagers, and then having high employment churn and being unhappy. There's many businesses out there that operate this way. But I think most don't have that luxury. And so they're fighting to survive. And for business owners that care, and for leadership that care, a very common response, I believe, is to try to manage the chaos by tailgating and micromanaging. Yeah. And so we know, like, LinkedIn is full of it, and rightfully so. Like, stop micromanaging your people. And I guess I just want to say, like, I get it. I was that guy, but it's not because I was trying to be a jerk. I was trying to prevent the company from going under, and I didn't understand how to build a foundation so that you don't have to be that way. You can let processes and infrastructure do it for you. And now all you have to do is, if the KPIs begin to demonstrate that things are going the wrong direction, you pay attention to the data, and you have respectful conversations around people, because their performance was measurable and trackable and seeable, right? But when you can't track, you can't measure, and you can't see, what you're doing is you're constantly on top of people because you're full of fear and worry, and you don't want to lose. And that's the best you could do. So.
Oh man. I appreciate you, like, just being so honest with that and demonstrating the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A growth mind or a fixed mindset would say, my chairman of my board is telling me this, and like, he's wrong and he doesn't get it, and basically like pointing the finger back and not owning, like, how do I grow through this? How do I respond to this? It's not fun to hear.
Right.
But, recently I heard someone say to fail stands for like first attempt in learning. It's like, okay, how can I learn from this? Like, clearly you were chose to grow and say, all right, there's got to be better systems, like, or else this thing is going to tank. Like, I need to change we need to create more processes, and almost like took that low, but turned it into now clearly like an incredible service offering from like what you've learned in that. It's amazing.
I appreciate that.
So this is a podcast about success, but if you ask anybody on the street how to define that, everyone's going to have a different definition. So tell me, for you, how would you define success, and how will you know if or when you've achieved success?
Wow. That's a big one, man. I'll take a stab at it. Right now on your podcast, the answer I would give for defining success is achieving what I set out to get in a way that does not compromise the healthy, it does not compromise the mind and heart of people. That would be success to me. Baked into that means I hit my revenue goal. I hit the milestone that I wanted to achieve, but did it in a way that was orderly, was governed, and rather than beat people down, it empowered them through health. And we all got there, there will be ups and downs. We got there safely, healthily, and happily. I said earlier, I think I did, great companies are built by great people.
You did.
And so at this stage in my journey, if people have to sacrifice their mental health, their physical health to have a great job, then something broke. Especially since we know that if you have a bad work environment, an unhealthy work environment where there's gossip and anger and frustration and dissatisfaction and unhappiness, it doesn't end when you wrap up for the day. It walks out the door with you and drives in the car to you home, and then it spills out on your spouse, and it spills out on your kids, and it spills out on your friendships, right? It ripple effects into the world. And so I feel like, I know it's earnest, it's an earnest position, but business owners and business leaders have a really amazing opportunity to affect the world, because most of us people have to work, No,
I'm totally with you. I love that definition, and I've seen like the impact of business owners caring for the way that if they foster it well, if they are faithful with this tool, can immensely bless themselves and their families, their employees and their lives, their customers or clients, and their community, because they're healthier in their community. And so it really hits so many areas of your life when you have this tool that can be really powerful and can also be really destructive if done poorly. But I love your definition of setting out, like achieving what I set out to accomplish in a way that, not only doesn't compromise the people, the minds, the hearts, the health, but like honestly flourishes it.
That's right.
Along the way is really a wonderful definition. Well, Garrett, thanks for taking time and being on the Self-Employment Success Podcast. I've really loved having you here.
Leland, right back at you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that very much. And it was really great to have this conversation.
Of course. If listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. My handle is Garrett Delph, my first last name. And of course, they can go to the Clarity Ops website. It's clarityops.co. And
Awesome.
lots of content.
And we'll have that linked in the show notes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Leland.